Happy 4th of July. I want to read you a passage here today. It's in the Gospel of John, and it's in John 15. And so it's interesting when you look at the Gospel of John, starting in about, I think, the 13th chapter, all the way to the very end of this gospel, it's getting ready for the crucifixion. It's getting ready for Christ sacrificially laying down his life. And in John 15, he starts talking to his close followers about what he is all about and what they're to be all about. And he's telling them, hey, listen, you have to love each other. As I have loved you, so you need to love one another. And then in John 15, verse 13, our verse here today, he spells it out, what that looks like. He says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And that's what Christ was about to do. And that's what Christ would call all of his followers to do, to lay down their lives for each other. Now, in our church family, in our country, on Memorial Day, also on the 4th of July weekend, we remember those and reflect on the men and women who have served our country. Many who have laid down their life, put themselves in harm's way, that we might experience the freedom that we have here today, the freedoms that many times we take for granted. So today, we're honored to have in our service a guy who served in the special forces. He was a ranger in the Army. He served 5 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. He also was a part of the mission that captured Saddam Hussein. He has been a part of our church family for over 10 years. He and his wife, Lacey, have 2 sons, Oliver and Elliot. And it's my privilege to welcome today to 1111 our very own Sergeant Stephen Cunningham. Sergeant, come on up.
Thank you.
Have a seat. Man, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you have a fan club here from Oklahoma, right?
I do, yes. In-laws, Lacey's folks, her sister, her husband, and Oliver.
Yeah. So I think we have a picture of your family up there behind there. You can see them there. Well, man, tell me about being in special forces, being a ranger. That's something guys don't like to say it, but something that most guys aspire to. Either that or pro football, right? I mean, that's the goal. And so how do you do that? You can't just kind of walk up and say, hey, I want to be a SEAL. I want to be a ranger. What was your story?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's easier than this. So I'll start with that. And football players make a lot more money than government workers.
Yes, yes, they do.
No, to answer your question, you actually do just walk up to the recruiter and kind of tell them what you want to be, and then they'll give you the rundown if that's possible or not. In my case, it was a recruiter that had a poster behind his desk of some guys all camoed up in the jungle on a raft, high-speed weapons, looking really cool. And I said, I'll do that. And he kind of laughed just like that, right? Yeah. No. And he said, well, I can't guarantee you that, but I can give you a contract that will send you to base training. You'll go to infantry school, airborne school, and then you can go through ranger assessment and selection. And if you make it, then you're in. And I didn't realize at the time, but once you make it, that's when the real work begins. But I did make it, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, yeah. So you were how old?
So I enlisted halfway through my senior year of high school, so I was 18, and then shipped out for basic training in the summer of 2001.
And what year? So 2001. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
So tell me, how many people start off and how many people finish?
In my RIP class, it was in the mid 300s, mid to high 300s, and 64 of us graduated in that class.
And how do they weed you out? What's the process of finding out who's got what it takes and who doesn't?
Physical abuse. It's a lot of sleep deprivation. It's not any one talent that they're looking for. They're essentially looking for guys that won't quit. So, sleep deprivation, some food deprivation, a lot of physical activity thrown in on top of that.
Like give us an example of physical activity, because that's going to be a relative term here.
Sure. Well, you don't walk anywhere. You live on your chest doing push-ups. And when you're not doing that, you have something heavy on your back and you're running. Probably the biggest benchmark fitness test would have been, it was untimed, unknown distance ruck march with a 45-pound backpack on. And it ended up being 12 miles in 2 hours was the standard. And you're running harder because you don't know if you're going to make it. But that was probably one of the more difficult physical challenges.
And where did the training take place?
I would say 80% of my training was at Fort Benning in Georgia. I went to basic training there, infantry training, airborne school. RIP was there, and then I went back for Darby phase of Ranger School. So I spent a lot of time at Fort Benning.
Yeah. How about, but you trained all
over the country, all over the world. If we weren't deployed in combat, we were somewhere else training around the world, around the country. So I told you this morning, out of the 4 years that I was enlisted and stationed at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah at 1st Ranger Battalion, total time in Savannah was about 9 months, just due to training cycles and deployment cycles.
So talk to us about, for those non-military here, a deployment. What does that entail?
Sure. So I guess you could say we were fortunate. We did 90-day rotation. So a combat deployment for special operations, and us at the time specifically, were 90 days. There are 3 Ranger battalions, and we just rotated through that cycle. So deployed for 90 days, home for 180. On a deployment, it was pretty fast-paced. A mission every night. We were on a reverse schedule. We'd sleep all day. We were up all night. And we'd have our routine, and just every night going and looking for bad guys.
So how many missions were being a deployment?
80 probably in a 90-day rotation.
80 missions in 90 days.
Right.
And you're going at night with those special...
With night vision, right? Yeah.
Night vision, yeah.
So the lasers, the cool stuff. You get in these mountains in Afghanistan where some of these people had never seen electricity. So when you land on their roof coming down from a helicopter and you have green eyes and it was, they thought aliens were taking over.
Oh, of course, yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah. So tell us about the deployment, because back then there was a deck of cards, and talk to us about that deck of cards and how that related to your missions.
Sure. So in Iraq, the invasion of Iraq, they had formulated a list of the most wanted bad guys and matched them up with a card in a deck, and Saddam being the ace of spades, and then priority level down from there. So from the invasion in early 2003 until his capture in late 2003, at least every special operations mission was geared towards somebody specifically in that deck. And it was like that on my rotation in late 2003. And you're going through every mission and catching bad guys, and it starts to bleed together. And when they tell you that they know where Saddam is, you don't really believe it because we'd been down that road a few times. And actually, me personally, that was supposed to be our last mission for that deployment, and we were going to go get ready to go home.
Yeah. So were you guys looking for Osama bin Laden too, or was that a part of your team or someone else?
Right, we did. In Afghanistan, it was a little different. It was more geared towards eliminating the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So there wasn't a lot of actionable intelligence on bin Laden at the time. So anything they did find was big, but I think the trail was hotter when we got to Iraq for Saddam.
Which one was more arduous? Was Afghanistan or Iraq tougher?
Environmentally, Afghanistan for sure. The mountains just unrelenting in that environment. So hot in the summer, so cold in the winter. Some of these routes that insurgents were taking across the border were 10,000 feet, and getting up there in helicopters. And so Afghanistan was extreme. Iraq was, I was staying in one of Saddam's palaces that had a swimming pool, and we were hitting golf balls into the Tigris River. So Iraq really wasn't that bad.
Well, that's what you're doing during the day, but at night.
Right. At night, we were in the right. Yeah, it's a little different. We were just working at night in the city. It was, it was an hour, 2 hour mission versus a 6 hour mission in Afghanistan, where everything's by helicopter and in those types of environments.
And did you guys work with other special forces like SEAL teams, and how did that work?
We did. Worked with the SEALs. We worked with Air Force Special Operations. We had attachments every mission because those guys control all of our transportation, and then the air support, and then other Army Special Operations units. And they divided up by location primarily. And at that time, the Navy SEALs had Afghanistan, and Army Special Operations Delta Force had Iraq. So depending on where we were primarily in support of those units.
Yeah. How did they prepare you guys psychologically for what you were going to face in those deployments? Because you were in a lot of just extreme situations, life and death. How did they prepare y'all psychologically to deal with, say, fear and anxiety?
Sure. For me, I was on the 1st Battalion rotation in the Global War on Terror, so it was kind of new ground. Nobody in the unit had been in combat. There some guys in the other units, Delta Force, they'd done stuff like maybe clandestine type stuff, so they were more suited for that. So ignorance and arrogance is kind of what I tell people. I was 20 years old, and every teenager thinks they're tough, but when somebody gives you a really cool gun and lots of training and you can lift lots of weight, you really think you're invincible. But it's the training, the trust in your teammates, because that's really all you have in moments like that.
Tell me, are you still in contact with your fellow Rangers?
I am. Yeah, I've a tight group. They're brothers now, but we're spread out across the country. But we stay in touch. There's plenty of banter through the text, but we try to link up at least once a year.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about that, about Saddam Hussein and how we eventually captured him.
Sure. So bomb makers were kind of the hot ticket item at that time, and anybody that they were using to make some of their more sophisticated IEDs and bombs. And so that's kind of what we were doing is rounding these guys up. And like I said, it was supposed to be our last mission. We went to this guy's house, got him, and way above my pay grade, somehow this guy was interrogated and
the bomb maker was?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, and knew somebody that knew the cook of Saddam, and just through a convoluted chain, that the higher-ups decided that we needed to refit and move out in support of capturing Saddam. And so that's what happened. I wasn't specifically
Pulling them out. Yeah.
Right, on site at the shed, pulling them out, but through the network and everything, when the call came through that they did pull him out, heard that, and then as he was transported back to Baghdad at BIOP, that actually was our last mission, and so then we separated up guard shifts as we were waiting for 2nd Ranger Battalion to come and relieve us. So I had two personal guard shifts with him.
So you guarded Saddam Hussein, just you?
I did.
Just like
me,
this?
Just me, just like us. So he was in a room, and when he wanted to go to another room and exercise, he would walk right in front of me and tell me things about presidents, and I might smirk or have some smart aleck remark, but unauthorized, of course. I wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah. You said he spoke perfect English.
Perfect English.
Yeah.
With his accent, but perfect enunciation.
Yeah.
I was sitting in a elementary school style desk with the wood with the wraparound. It had a wire bookshelf and a full combat kit, and barely even fit in there with the magazines and my rifle and even my helmet, which why I don't know, but I don't make those decisions. There was a Time magazine from 1991 when the first World Trade Center bombing and the Gulf War was featured on that. And so I guess that's somebody from the CIA, that's their sense of humor.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah. Well, tell us, how did you start reassimilating back into, say, civilian life after you served?
Very difficultly. Yeah, it was a challenge. I went to school for a little bit. That was kind of a dead-end road for me. And at that time, I was part of the first generation to get out of the military in wartime. And the resources weren't there, the knowledge wasn't there. And so that was a pretty difficult time in my life. Thankful for my wife.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me about, I know a lot of people coming out of combat, and now it's kind of in, I don't know, modern culture, the concept of PTSD. Is that something you struggled with?
Sure.
How did you deal with that?
And well, the culture of special operations is you don't go to sick call. You don't, if you're hurt and you're a quitter. And for better or worse, that's what makes the unit function at a high level, but it can spit you out the back end pretty quick. And so I think pride plays a big role of that too, in recognizing that some of my outlook is not normal or not healthy. And thankfully, they do a lot better job of steering guys towards paths of reintegrating in civilian life. But it was a challenge, and I don't point fingers anywhere. At this point, I'm just grateful to be where I'm at.
Right, yeah. Do you still have to process that at all, being in combat or not? Is it kind of, do you feel like God's put that in the past?
It is in the past. I physically couldn't do it even if I wanted to, but it seems so long ago now. I mean, I can remember certain specific things like it was yesterday, but now it seems so long ago that it's almost surreal. But proud to have done what I did and when I did. There's a lot of people that have done a lot more than I have and will continue to do so, but like I said, just grateful to have my family and the community that we have and be where I am right now.
Yeah. Talk to us, yeah. Talk to us about Second and your family's involvement here.
Oh, sure.
What's that look like?
I think we've been members 10-ish years, but, Houston's full of bubbles. When we first moved here, we moved right to this area, and the church is not small, so it's like this big flashing light. When we were looking for a church, well, I can see one from our house. I can see.
There it is. Yeah.
And no, we've been here ever since. It's been a huge blessing. We were probably members for about 5 years before we really got plugged into a Bible study, and and we love the service, but the Bible study has just been immensely important. And not only, learning about Scripture, but just having people to make that walk with. And so we're grateful for that as well.
Yeah, so I think what he's talking about, is that our church, when you first come to Second, as you said, Stephen, people go, wow, it's really big. But once people join a Bible study class, and we have classes, it's kind of commercial here, right? We have classes at 9:30 and also at 8:30 that feed into our worship services, but those are medium-sized groups, if you would, and it's really a place where the church gets really small, and you develop that sense of community that you and Lacey have experienced here at Second.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really critical that if you haven't taken that next step, that you...
I would certainly encourage it. It's been a blessing.
Yeah. Talk to us, if you could, a little bit about our country. I know we're celebrating our nation's birthday this week, and just tell us a little bit about what America means to you.
Sure. Simply just proud to be an American, or at least I know I'm free. Free to worship, free to speak, just all the civil liberties that we enjoy that people don't realize could be taken away pretty easily. And so grateful to people like my grandfathers that flew in World War II and kind of paved the way, and people like the church community that stand up for religious beliefs and stuff like that. So just grateful.
Yeah.
Grateful to be an American and be a Christian, really.
Yeah. Let's thank Sergeant Stephen Cunningham for being here today. Brother, we appreciate it. Great job, man.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Really good.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Please be seated. I'm often amazed when I'm able to meet guys like Stephen, special forces or serving our military, just how humble, they are in serving our nation. So again, we're honored to have you a part of our church family, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.